Hey folks, Zach Osterman here, Insider Indianapolis Star. A bit of an emergency YouTube video. These have been getting, I guess, good feedback, so I thought we'd throw one of these on to connect to our insider from this afternoon. Of course, the big news, Donaven McCulley coming out of the transfer portal back to Indiana for what will be his senior year. He's probably about as big of an ad as Curt Cignetti could have gotten from all the players that went into the portal with respect to some others, Carter Smith, Cam Camper. McCulley was the one that I think probably it's fair to say flashed the most sort of, the highest ceiling, and in particular this year, 48 catches, 644 yards and 6 touchdowns. Tom Allen, when McCulley moved from quarterback to wide receiver last season, just kind of said, his ceiling is tremendous. His potential is substantial. He's just kind of got to figure out, A, the nuances of his new position, because McCulley had never really played receiver. And then B, he's just kind of got to understand, where his ceiling is so that he can kind of bust through it. And I think it's fair to say that happened over the last 5 games of last season. McCulley, in that 5-game stretch, had 28 catches, 420 yards, and 5 of his 6 touchdowns. If you averaged those numbers out across the course of a 12-game season, he would have finished. I did this math, and I don't have it in front of me because I'm not well prepared because I'm shooting this video pretty fast. But if I'm remembering the numbers rightly, if you stretch that over a whole season, that'd be 67 catches for a little over 1,000 yards and 12 scores. And all 3 of those numbers would have been top 3 in the Big Ten this season. And that's kind of the numbers test, I guess. When you see the eye test, it's even more sort of obvious. It's even more clear. Because McCulley, the number of times he drew pass interference off an opponent, the number of games where he'd go on a run of a couple drives where he just, stacked 5, 6, 7 catches, and the rhythm that he could get into at one of those 2 boundary spots was just really impressive, and you could see that he was finally starting to kind of bust through. I don't think Rod Carey, who was IU's offensive coordinator by that point, was speaking in hyperbole when he was saying, I hope Donaven doesn't have a ceiling, because he looked like that kind of player. When he went into the portal, I think it's fair to say there was some optimism at bringing him back, and then that probably waned as the Penn States, the Nebraskas, and so forth got involved. But I would say in the last probably 24 to 48 hours, it felt like there was kind of a renewed surge of hope that McCulley might come back, and now he has. He announced on social media on Friday afternoon he'll be back. Again, he's a senior. He'll only have 1 year to play. He doesn't get a COVID year. His freshman year was 2021. He's played every year up through there. He has a redshirt year, technically, if he was able to kind of reclaim it because of an injury. But, of course, no one will want that. Indiana would much rather have a healthy McCulley for 12 games in 2024 and see what he can do. For this offense, I think it's fair to say Curt Cignetti is probably going to build a significant portion of this offense, certainly at least the passing game, around Donaven McCulley. I imagine we'll talk to him at some point in the next few weeks, and there'll be more to kind of digest from that. But I wrote this for IndyStar.com. I'll link it in the below, like wherever the comments are. There's also the symbolic element of this, which is we heard Indiana talk a lot during the coaching search about there's more NIL resources, there's more aggressiveness toward, making sure the next coach has the resources to not just go out and get some guys, whether it be high school recruits, transfers, but also retain some players, because a program like Indiana is always going to have some schools looking down and saying, hey, what do you got on your roster? What down there might help us out? What players down there could be good for us? And I think there is probably, and this merits a further conversation we won't get into today, but I think there is probably a bit of an argument for the idea that maybe some programs, if they can be good at player development, can almost sell themselves as, come here, get better, showcase your ability. If you want to stay, great. If you want to move on, make sure it's only to a big school, and then you sort of bolster your reputation of, we get good players, we develop them. We don't stand in their way if a Georgia comes along or a USC comes along, but then we are essentially that stepping stone. And in the meantime, you assume you probably have some very real success because you're bringing in players of this caliber. And then as time goes on, maybe your profile elevates. Fewer of those players want to leave. You have more resources. It just kind of builds on itself. You see that a lot with clubs in European soccer. And the ones that do it well, do it very well. But I think that's a kind of a longer term conversation. In the here and now, Indiana A just needs impact players, and B, I think McCulley, there's all the sort of tangible, statistically definable reasons why you want him back. But there is a further one, and this is what I wrote on the website. It makes a statement that Indiana can keep its best player. That Michigan, Penn State, Texas A&M, Kentucky, some other SEC schools, depending on who you talk to, maybe Florida State was kicking the tires, maybe Notre Dame was at least kind of, probing and seeing what was what. It makes a statement that you can keep a guy that big schools wanted. And it says that you don't just have the momentum, you don't just have a head coach who sells, his system and his plan really well to his players, but you also have, just the resources. I come back to that Mike Loxley quote from the preseason a lot. Kids will get dressed in a trash can for $25,000. That's obviously a bit hyperbole, but the point is NIL is a prominent part of the conversation for these kids anymore, especially the ones that go in the portal, because they have some sense of what the market looks like and they want to know where they're valued in it. And for Indiana to be able to say, we've got the opportunities, we've got the NIL resources to keep our best player in the fold, to get him, not just keep him here, but get him out of the portal when he was taking visits to other schools. He was getting offers from, Big Ten rivals. That's not a small thing, because that sends a signal that you're serious. You're willing to be serious in the NIL space. And, I think there were obviously some criticisms, some not so, or I guess you'd say some pretty thinly veiled criticisms from Tom Allen on the way out the door about Indiana needing to embrace more in the way of NIL, needing to modernize its approach with a really sort of heavy nod toward NIL. This is just one player. This isn't some sort of culture shift, but it does feel substantial that Indiana can sort of send this message out. We've got an all Big Ten caliber receiver. Big time Big Ten schools wanted him, and we were able to commit the resources necessary to get him to say, no, I'm going to stay here for my one more year of college. So a substantial win for Curt Cignetti. Another big kind of brick in the wall in his recruiting efforts here across this space before the portal signing window and the high school signing window next week. And just a player that Indiana was very hopeful it could bring back and now has. So we'll leave it there. Kansas tomorrow. Obviously going to have a ton of coverage from that. Between now and then, for the Indianapolis Star, I'm Zach Osterman. Donaven McCulley is back. If you just cottoned on to the last 10 seconds of this video, we'll talk to you soon.